Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Lecturer of Methodology in Teaching English as a Foreign Language course, Dr. Muhammad Andriana Gafar MMPD, and also my beloved friends. We are from Group 14. My name is Nesya Kamila Alshira, and I will be the moderator and also the first speaker. My friend Azhar Fauzan Aziz as the second speaker, and Fanie Trisna is the last speaker. Today we will be presenting about Chapter 14. Assessing what, why, and how. First, I will show you the preliminary. First, assessment, what is it and what is important about it. Second, the why, purposes of assessment. Third, effective assessment design. Fourth, beyond testing, alternative and assessment. And the last is conclusion and outlook. And then I will explain the background. As an experienced foreign language teachers, evaluating the learner's competence development with providing a variety of approaches is very important. Assessment and learning should be seen as inseparable in the foreign language classroom. Therefore, it is vital that teachers are in a position to integrate assessment with instruction so that they use appropriate forms of teaching. The capacity for this has come to be called language assessment literacy. The first material is assessment. What is it and what is important about it? Assessment is the term that is most widely accepted in the language testing and assessment community now. It connotes a broader concept than testing. Green explains this definition further by suggesting that the evidence is gathered from the performance based on our beliefs both about the nature of language will play or is playing in the lives of the assessee. First, assessment for learning. Assessment of learning focuses on the outcome, the products of learning only, while assessment for learning takes a process-oriented perspective. Assessment involves, among other things, diagnostic assessment, which aims at identifying strengths and weaknesses of the learner in order to help them move on from their current level of learning. Second, quality criteria of assessment. Whether this is called testing, assessment, or evaluation, they have the same major principles in common. They are reliability, validity, and practicality. Reliability. A useful assessment is reliable. That means consistent in its measurement and dependable. The threats to reliability. Students being temporarily ill. Learner-related reliability. Subjective or biased raters who come up with different results. Inter-rater reliability. Validity. A valid assessment from an earlier viewpoint has a close correspondence between test results and the skills needed in real life. The threats to validity: construct irrelevance and construct underrepresentation. Practicality is related to the aspect of feasibility of a language assessment. For example, regarding the time, cost, or effort that has to be invested in an assessment. Next, the why, purpose of assessment. Assessment of learning is closely associated with summative assessment, which typically occurs at the end of a course, a unit of instruction, etc. Then, achievement tests. At the same time, can be used for diagnostic purposes in order to see what might have to be covered again in future lessons. Formative assessment is informal and ongoing. It is typically embedded in classroom tasks. A teacher might ask the learners, for example, to present their dream school. Proficiency test. The purpose of this or assessment is to gauge whether a learner has the necessary skills in the foreign language to carry out a task, study at university in the target language country, do a job, and so on. Diagnostic tests are about eliciting information on learners' learning needs. In other words, their results determine the areas that learners have difficulties in and are to put a focus on in a course or unit of instruction. Placement tests. A placement test has a formative role to play, although this is not always the case. Placement tests are varied in their contents. For example, the ability to use past tenses for narration, and formats, open-ended responses, multiple choice formats, etc., depending on the program in question and the needs of the institution.
Okay, thank you for Nesya for delivered the first and second material. Alright, my name is Azhar. In this section, I will deliver the 14.3 material, especially for the how. And I want to deliver the background for the first, the effective assessment design. In Germany, the class worked with textbook and group. The learners group has been involved in listening, reading, speaking, and writing activities, and at the end of the textbook unit that they worked on a mini project. Therefore, several things that must be considered in designing assessment. Next, classroom-based language assessment. Following a systematic approach based on Brown and Abe-Wickrama, the stages in developing and implementing assessment are determine the purpose of assessment, then state the objectives relating to the assessment, and draw up test specification, devise assessment item, and then administer the assessment. And the last thing is develop a system of scoring, provide relevant feedback. Alright, next. This slide will explain about the determining the purpose of the assessment. There are several ways can be done in carrying out purpose of the assessment. There are two assessment concepts. For the first is formative assessment. It usually used in daily activities like the daily test, short quiz, class discussion, attendance recap, and etc. For next assessment is called summative assessment. Is usually used in the end of the semester or the middle of semester, like a midterm exam, final exam, paper, and etc. Alright, next. Stating the objectives relating to the assessment. The purpose of student assessment, such as be able to provide written instruction or oral discourse, and what kind of language is used, as is follow this. Recognize oral and writing forms. Second, correctly produce phrases for giving direction orally and in writing. Then learn important word for the word fields and learn about famous site. And the last is be able to communicate in speaking and writing about things they have done using the present perfect. Alright, next slide. We'll explain about the drawing, the assessment specification. Specification tests such as multiple choice, reading assignment, email writing, and etc. are very important because they offer relevant information in assessment. Specification tests that more detailed have significant advantages such as ensuring assessment quality criteria, validity, and transparency of assessment. These things help communicate assessment principles and produce procedures to students and their parents. This type of assessment serves as a primary purpose in classroom-based assessment. Right, next. This slide will discuss about the managing assessment to enhance transparency and help learners perform to the best of their abilities. They need to be informed in advance of the condition of the best, such as follow time available, access to dictionaries, and the kind of item that will be on the test evaluation criteria, and then test taking strategies for optimal performance time for proofreading, and last is the best possible ordering of tasks in different scenarios. Okay, next. For this slide, I want to explain about the drawing assessment item. There are consists of two concepts from the drawing assessment item, and it called the closed-ended prompts and open-ended prompts. For the closed-ended prompts, we can use the non-verbal like ordering the picture in a story, and for verbal prompts, we can use multiple choice or and true or false tests. For the close-ended prompts, we can use the short answers, like make a two or more sentences, and for the long answers, we can use a make a paragraph or 500 word essay. The contextual factor. The process of designing an assessment item is not so easy, for example, in level of proficiency of learners group. The instructional objectives, the related assessment priorities of the teachers, practical issues, and etc. The choice assessment item. Some consideration in the assessment must also be made. For example, to 6 years class. This such as reading, a skill such as reading, listening, and writing must have a claim to content validity and reflect tasks that students know from the course. Alright, we're gonna move to the next slide. This slide I want to deliver the arranging block material. As a teacher, if we want to give our student an assignment or a task, one of it we can use this instruction. For first instruction, the student are given a map that they know from the textbooks. Next item is a matching exercise and focuses on reading comprehension. And the third uh, instruction, the next item is a reading or writing task that is in picture code and requires the learners to write short answers in which they use the present perfect. And the last instruction, last item concerns writing and is an open-ended response format in the form of an email framework. Now, for the example, uh, when we scoring writing test, we can give 3-point sentence correct for the 3 point for the sentence correctly and appropriately completed, and we can give our student 2 points for the sentence appropriately complete with minor mistakes. We can give 1 point for the sentence complete but mistakes inhibit comprehension, and give them 0 points for the sentence not complete or sentence not comprehensible. We still in the arranging blocks material. Now for this slide, I want to explain about the example score of reading or writing tests in on arranging blocks. We can give 3 points for the picture correctly described, no grammatical or orthographical mistakes. We can give 2 points for our student for the picture correctly described, minor grammatical or orthographical mistakes, and 1 point for picture correctly described, but major grammatical or orthographical mistakes, and we can give 0 point for the picture not described and structure not used or major mistakes. Alright, that's all from the arranging block material. Now we're gonna move to the next slide. In this slide, I want to describe about the developing assessment system, providing relevant feedback. It was consists of 2 concepts. First is scoring and weighting. After providing more complex tests and productive tests, one student submitted the answer sheets and it has been collected. Decisions on scoring have to be taken before reading and marking the test. And then, for the rating scales, the system of the assessment criteria can be used with observable and scalable performance descriptions. There are a few criteria for the rating scale, such as a vocabulary, grammar, accuracy, coherence and cohesion, communicative appropriateness. Right, that's all for the assessing rating scale criteria. For the developing assessment, the score then needs to be translated into a numerical grade. Feedback is required for a student because the educational authorities and school need it, such as administration, performance, and etc. And for students, the feedback use and or need for such as correct part and incorrect part. Alright, that's all from me, and I'm sorry for maybe my recording is a lot of noise because my mic is not clear enough. But thank you for pay attention to my for my material. And for the next material will be delivered by Fanie. For Fanie, the time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you to moderator and Azhar for giving me opportunity to explain alternative assessment. Introduce myself, my name is Fanie Trisna. I will explain alternative assessment. The aim of the alternative assessment is to get the dynamic picture of student competency development and to collect data to document the ongoing process. However, the term alternative assessment is strictly counterproductive as it suggests that it is something new. Instead, the term alternative in assessment will be used as it is seen as part of assessment with test as part of the assessment and is discussed above. Next, the characteristic of alternative in assessment can be summarized follow: ongoing informal, formative, non-intrusive. Next, interested in the development of students over time rather than the comparison of students with each other. Next, focus on student strength rather than weaknesses. Next, authentic because assignments are based on activities that reflect typical classroom assignment and real life setting. And last, usually associated with some performance appreciation. Okay, next slide I will explain teacher observation. The teacher observation is student to see the response given send blanks, question are asked, all data impressionistic which organized from observation stored in the teacher mind to form an impression of the learner ability in foreign language. Although these impressions are sometimes very accurate, their resolution must be improved by systematic teacher observation. Next, plan systematic observation. As an assessment tool, it can remove stress for the assessment situation because students are not aware of the fact that they are being assessed. In addition, increases the relevance of teacher feedback to student. Observation can be recorded with the help of each one observation sheet, 2 checklists, 3 rating scales. Next slide. How does the teacher make this observation? Teacher need to determine the purpose of observation and limit the number of students who will be observed at the time. On the time, teacher must be deciding what to do with variety of class assignment from the length, utterance in class participation to student use the communication strategies in role plays. Criteria for assessment include pronunciation, turn-taking, use of correct phrase to give direction and task achievement. And second point, self-assessment. In self-assessment, students reflect on their performance acting as assessor, using a set of criteria or checklists for assessment, achieve additional perspective on the performance of students to be assessed. What is the purpose of self-assessment? Self-assessment is carried out to avoid students underestimating their performance. Their assessment can increase student motivation, the learning process with the hope the student will get a realistic picture of good or medium or poor performance. The same criteria can then be used for subsequent teacher assessment. Okay, next slide. I will explain peer assessment. In this method or peer assessment, students evaluate and assess each other's performance based on checklist criteria. What is the purpose of peer assessment? Peer assessment is carried out with the aim of increasing student autonomy and collaboration to improve the quality of student work, which may result in increased motivation. What kind of activities can be implemented? Peer assessment can be used with various activities, for example, peer assessment of writing, with students working in pairs and assessing each other's written product from a draft, giving each other comments to improve their draft, after which it will be assessed by the teacher so that it becomes an effort to improve the quality of learning. Okay, I will next slide explain definition of portfolio. A portfolio is collection of a student work that aim to demonstrate effort, progress and achievement in particular area. Portfolio material come directly from the owner activities, a strong relationship between learning and the work to be assessed. Additionally, portfolio have the potential to increase ownership of learning because students decide what goes into the portfolio and is assessed during conference of portfolio material, teacher, learner interaction in encourage and learning is done individually. Portfolio assessment is firmly embedded in the curriculum and time in mind for material selection, review and conference with teacher. Guidelines for material selection must be provided and assessment criteria must be clear in advance. Okay, I will explain conclusion and outlook. Conclusion and outlook. Current trend in classroom-based language assessment challenge for teachers in language assessment. The chapter describes the basic issues in classroom-based language assessment relating to the what, why, and how for assessment. The field of language assessment is dynamic to requirements for classroom-based language assessment are constantly changing. As a popular teaching approach, standardized tests have been introduced. that ensure the educational standards are met. This in turn has led to increasing present and standardized large-scale assessment that sometimes differ from more formative for a form of classroom-based assessment. The reality of heterogeneous student group in all time of school due to promotion of inclusive education, increased immigration movement, and other factors that require individualized teaching but also differentiated assessment. For all these requirements and challenges, teachers need to have sufficient level of language assessment literacy so that they can respond appropriately to this and ensure good quality assessment that serve the purpose of good quality learning in the foreign language classroom. Okay, thank you for watching until the end of the video. I love to hear your question to feedback now. Please feel free to share. Thanks again. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.